Well, welcome to the first episode of How Might Hope, the podcast that puts hope as central to our lives and to the world around us. In this first podcast, we're going to ask ourselves, how might discipleship become a movement? My guest is my good friend, Sean Blomquist, church planter, leadership coach, spiritual director, 3D Movements Associates, and founder of Access Leadership, where he helps business leaders access their God-given design that will shape their life and work. And that really means that Sean is outside the walls, out in the city, out in the town, out at the businesses, teaching people how to make disciples where they're at. And so I thought this was a great topic for Sean to have him here. I'm Bud Locke, and I am the lead pastor here at Hope Center Covenant Church. So Sean, the first question that I have for you, we're talking about discipleship. Yep. What is discipleship?
Well, I always like having a working definition of discipleship, and we tend to complicate discipleship in the church. And so we take something that's simple to understand, but it's hard to do. Mm-hmm. So we like to make it more complicated.
Yep.
So we don't have to do it. So to give us some hope, I mean, a couple of working definitions I have that have been really helpful is one, a lot of us who kind of swim in the discipleship realm of the church and life, we love Dallas Willard. Mm-hmm. And so Dallas simply says, we want to be like Jesus, and we want to do the things that Jesus did. Do you have a plan that helps you to grow in the character of Jesus, be like Jesus? And then do you have a way to help people to do the things that Jesus did? And so that's one way. And then the way we talk about it at 3D Movements is simply we want to help people grow in the character and competency of Jesus. So that's kind of our working definition. Character is everything that has to do with our identity and being like Jesus and being his children. And then competency is actually doing everything that Jesus did.
Amen.
So,
all right.
That's what we talk about.
Well, that's great. We all love Dr. Willard there.
Yes.
And, that's awesome. So besides making discipleship too complicated and besides our efforts to at times avoid discipleship and not call people to follow Jesus like we're calling him, like we're following him, what are some of the other hindrances to discipleship today?
Yeah, we can think of a lot of hindrances, and but I think we always want to say the hindrances either our people or our leadership. We tend to want to put blame on people, and I think our adversary today, the one that we're really having to force, look at, is the culture. Our real adversary towards discipleship is the culture that we're in. And that's church culture that we have, and it is the culture of the Bay Area where we live. And so when I think about the hindrance, like here's one, cultural hindrance we have, is that when the operating system of what we're doing with Christianity is the church,
right?
Then we've kind of moved off of where things are, because what's happening in our culture is we use church as the operating system. And if church is the operating system, then it's the preacher, the communicator who has to preach from the platform and put on good programs for people to come.
You're threatening my job here, Sean.
It is my job as well, my friend. But that's what's at stake. It's a culture that has happened over 2,000 years. We started as a relationship with Jesus in Palestine, moved to Greece and became a philosophy, moved to Europe and became a institution, and then moved to America and became a corporation. And we've just shot and missed. Wow. And so with that miss, we actually have to reset, and every generation has to reset back onto what is going on. And so we're just doing a reset right now. And I think what COVID has done is basically exposed what was already there in the church, that we have a consumer individualistic culture, and the COVID has revealed that. And so now we're in the situation we're in. And so we have to switch the operating system. So like the church, if the operating system is the church, then we have programs that we push for our killer app, right?
Okay. Yeah.
And what I think is the operating system is discipleship, and Sundays is just one of our apps that helps us grow in our faith.
So when
it's a
you say
turnaround.
church, you don't mean the called out people of God.
No,
which is
I mean
what Scripture
exactly.
means.
I'm
You mean
talking
what
about
we're talking about here.
on Sundays.
You know, numbers in the seats,
Yes.
numbers of money coming in,
Yep.
who are we reaching,
Yep.
all of that, programs, all of that.
Everything about the building and coming on Sundays.
Okay.
You know, even though we talk about it being biblical and we're trying to be a people of God, we still, culturally as churches,
Right.
we operate as churches, the operating system rather than discipleship. And that's a cultural issue that we've learned.
Okay.
So
Nice.
I'd say that's the main hindrance that we're running into.
Okay. And so
Yep.
we have this hindrance, and then what are some of the hindrances you see outside of the people of God or outside of the church that are making discipleship more and more difficult today?
Yeah, you know, I think, you know, we could say that people are disinterested and in everything that's going on. We could say we're in a hostile environment with Christianity and things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I think really, as I'm experiencing people out there, I don't think that that's true. I think we as the church feel like it's hostile, where more than it really is.
Mm-hmm.
Like if we could just integrate our life and say, "Hey, my worldview is following Jesus," and I think generally everybody would be cool with that, as long as, you know, what we're doing is we're operating in a different way, which is we're not being that guy.
Okay.
You know, that guy being, you're trying to convert me and do these things to me rather than just be an authentic person.
Okay.
So I think really the Bay Area culture is actually more open and receptive just to people who have an authentic faith, you know, but we have to get to that place in ourselves.
Okay.
So I'm not sensing there's a ton of hostility against. We just have to start just really being in people's lives and loving our neighbors, you know, and just doing the stuff.
So we have the hindrances. We've identified those. We've said, okay, our MO needs to be less of doing church or having church and more about making disciples and inviting others to follow Jesus as we follow Jesus. Doing the things that Jesus did, living the life that Jesus lived, loving people like Jesus loved people, all of those things. What would be a way forward? How would you say somebody sitting, listening to this, maybe they're commuting to work right now, maybe they're sitting at home, finally got their kids off to school. They're going, I got a few minutes. Let me see what this first podcast is. What's going on here? What are they talking about? What would you say? How would you say, hey, here are some first steps you can take in this move forward so that discipleship becomes a movement rather than just a program?
Yeah. You know, here's the first thing. I think, you know, having the right method of discipleship is really what we want to have. And Jesus is real simple and clear. He just said, come follow me and I'll make you fishers of people. I think one of the paradigm shifts, and it's very hard for us in the Bay Area, is to have, instead of just having an information culture where we get information and content, and then we think that that's going to change us. You're awesome preaching, for one, you know, it's going to change us. We all realize that it's not bringing the transformation. We all understand that. So how do we actually have imitation? See, imitation is the key, but we live in a culture, again, the culture is the issue. We go from information to innovation. I'm going to take that information, I'm going to innovate it in my own context. Whereas I think the biblical picture is Jesus said, follow me and I will make you. And so do we have relationships with people where we actually want to imitate the life that they have in Christ? And do I want to be a person that has a life worth imitating? That's a fundamental shift from saying, oh, I'll never have a life worth imitating. I'm just going to keep bringing them to church and let the pastor do it or let the church do it. And we have to change. That's a paradigm shift we have to change.
Well, and I see a second shift in there is that we tend to be very individualistic in how we follow Jesus. I don't need to follow you in following Jesus. I'm just going to follow Jesus. I don't need to follow somebody else in following Jesus. I'm all about following Jesus.
Yeah. Or we say, I don't want you to follow me. I want you to follow Jesus.
Right.
The problem is Paul says, follow me as I follow Christ.
Right.
Paul says all over the place, imitate me as I imitate Christ. I mean,
Right.
the whole thing is embodiment.
Yep.
And there's some good humility in that.
Yeah.
But I would say, I want to invite you to follow me as I follow Christ. And hey, don't follow the parts of Jesus that I'm not living. Don't follow me as I'm not following Christ. Point it out to me, right? You know what I mean? And we just have to live a more open, authentic, accessible life with people, And I think that's one of the methods. And the other one, I think, is seeing that our everyday life, there is everyday opportunities of discipleship already happening. It's already happening in our life. We're just not totally aware of where God's at work in our life all the time. And for example, meals is the fundamental way that we can give people access to our lives.
Yep.
And you don't have to program that.
Yeah.
Again, there's so much of our life that we try to compartmentalize into religious programs rather than just going, no, your real life, you're already living it.
Yep.
You're playing soccer with, you're coaching your kids. You're in these groups. You're in this life already you have. Mm-hmm. Jesus is already there. What do you see that he's already doing in those relationships? Now, there takes some training in that because we're redoing. That's the paradigm shift. We have to see that God's at work in all these places already.
Right.
I think that's the fundamental way forward for us, is to see that God's already at work in the world, in these places already. His kingdom is at hand. Mm-hmm. We just need to change how we think about that.
Right.
And see that he's doing it already. Right. And that takes some discipleship on our part. That's what I do. That's what you do. We want to help people to see that God's already at work in your lives. Right. Let's not keep making it more complicated or busy.
So Sunday we talked about the idea of default versus deliberate lives. Is that we tend to grab on to that old way of doing things, the way that we learned maybe from parent, growing up, the way we learned from culture around us, the way we learned even in church, and the way they used to do it, and this is the way it has to be done.
Yes.
And to sit down and deliberately grab on to a mind shift and a thought process that discipleship is really what we're about. We're about following Jesus and inviting others to follow him with us. And we're also about, like you said before, finding others that we can follow as we follow Jesus together.
Absolutely.
So one of the things that kind of came to mind as you were talking was we need a better habit of accountability then.
Yes.
And a better definition of what accountability is.
Oh, yes.
Because, what we've learned accountability as is, church discipline.
Behavior modification.
Behavior modification.
Sin management.
Yeah, exactly. telling you not to do something or to do something else.
Absolutely.
This idea of accountability and authenticity and transparent living is a whole different concept. Talk a little bit more about that.
Yeah. Again, it's really simple to understand this. And for me, it's when I look at Jesus simply only did what he saw his Father doing. And he only said what his Father was telling him to say. And so if we are sons and daughters of God, and we are, co-inheritors in this body, then what I really believe God's saying is you can be like Jesus. And what that means is just do what the Father's telling you to do and just see where he's already at work. And what that simply means to me around discipleship and accountability especially is if we're in a group of people and the key is not behavior modification, but the key around discipleship and the key around accountability is simply, what do you hear God saying to you right now? And what are you going to do about it? If we had that mantra, that's what changes culture. For me, the number one, that'll change the operating system of the church. It changes every culture, all your Bible studies, every group you're in, every book study, everything you do. If you shift it around, what do we hear God saying and what are we going to do about it? And that's our genuine heart's desire. That's how we grow, because God's always at work. So where is he? What is he saying to me? Am I paying attention? And if you have accountability, then I'm not saying, oh, you didn't do that. It's like, but didn't the God of the universe speak to you about this? And you go, yeah. Well, if you're not going to listen to the God of the universe tell you what to do, then you're certainly not going to listen to me. You know what I mean? And so the accountability is kind of void unless you want to actually do what the God of the universe has told you to do. So that makes everything simple.
Yeah.
You know? Then it's just up to us to want to do it. So we use that. We call it the learning circle. It's just simply how we hear God and do what he says. It's out of Mark 1:15.
So, awesome. Which, by the way, we're talking about this Sunday. So there you go.
Awesome. Okay, I didn't know that. That's great.
Yeah, and so you're working and doing this with Access Leadership, and you're a pastor. And you're still doing it within the church. If you look at the theological church, the people of God, the move of God, all of that. But you're doing it not within the church as an institution or as a corporation that you were talking about. You're out there in the world discipling business leaders, discipling parents, discipling others who they're all new to this.
Absolutely.
Without breaking any confidences or whatever, do you have any stories that you can give as an example to some people who are listening that they may go, oh, that sounds like something I can use in my life?
Yeah. So I'm working with a business leader, and he's in Modesto.
Okay.
And he's a great leader, and was an elder in his church. He saw me do this for some of their church team and stuff, and he said, hey, would you coach me in business around these same tools? And I said, absolutely. And so I started, coaching him with another leader, just around certain tools. And he started applying some of these, just same spiritual tools. And for him, the number one thing is he began to see his work as disciple making with his coworkers, Christians and non-Christians. Right on. And he started in his wall in his office, he put, we're here to grow in our character and competency at work.
Wow.
And then what he told me was every meeting he has, he pulls the learning circle up there and says, okay, let's stay on course here. We're going to work on hearing what we're supposed to be doing today. Now he'd translate it, but it's really about doing some good observation, reflection on what's at hand right now.
Right.
But his fundamental thing is, I only want to do what God's asked me to do at this workplace. And that's the driving force for him. And so he's really ingrained this hearing and doing in his life. And he's starting to see some breakthrough. He's starting to see his teams build, and he's starting to see vision take place. He's starting to see, the culture change, whereas they had a pretty bad culture before.
Right.
And he's seeing the culture change in his workplace. And that's for me, discipleship. You're discipling people that are non-Christians and Christians, because you're just investing in people and helping give access to your life to help them be developed people in their workplace, because that's where they spend 8 to 10 hours of their day. I mean, it's a lot of life,
Right.
Can't be void of God. So that's what I get to do.
So how would you do that? Let's say you're not the business owner. You're just somebody who's working at a shop or working in an office, and you're one of the mid-level workers or helpers. What would this look like for them?
Yeah, I think when I talk to folks that they're just working, right? They're there. They have to come to work knowing fundamentally that God's at work at their work. And what's happening is they're not experiencing that. They're probably in the grind. So they need some investment from people in their life to help them to see where God's at work in their workplace, in their conversations, and seeing work as what you're contributing here to, what your work is. Your work is whatever widget or thing you're making or helping or serving. In some way, you are co-creating with God with what he gave you to do.
Right.
Now, some of us feel better about that than less, but if we don't see that our labor, in a sense, is contributing to the good of the world in a real way, that makes it really hard to feel a sense of hope with what we're doing. So that's bare bones, right?
Yeah.
Because then other than that, because some of us are maybe feeling like we're stuck in a cubicle, or I can't evangelize, or I don't talk to people all day. I totally get it. But how do you see your work as something that where you're contributing to the good of the world?
Nice.
Because God's in that. He's given you the ability to do these things.
Yep.
I'd say that's a baseline, but there's a lot of spiritual work in times of talking to God about your place at work, you know.
And even that's an imitation, because
absolutely
in creation, every day God creates a stage of the heavens and the earth, and he says, that's good.
That's right.
It's good.
Yeah.
And
You have to have a good
you
creation.
could do that when you go to work, and you can go, that's good. What I'm contributing, that's good.
Yeah, we have
that's
we have
imitation.
We call it good creation theology.
Yeah.
That he gave us work to do.
Yep.
And that's how we contribute to the good of the world.
Wonderful. So if discipleship's going to be our paradigm, and if discipleship doesn't only happen within, or probably within this paradigm, it would happen less within the walls here, and more everyday discipleship. Since you're only here for an hour
and a half.
maybe 2, maybe 3, depending on how many programs you go to. You're only here so much. You're out in the world most of the day. And so if that's where discipleship happens, then what is the role of the for lack of a better word, the programs and the institutional or the corporation, like you said?
Yeah, for sure.
What is the role?
Yeah. So again, we're not throwing the baby out with bathwater. We need Sundays, man. I love Sundays. I want to worship the King. Okay. What happens is when we put 90% of our person hours towards the hour and a half on Sunday and maybe a few programs, what happens is nobody has any available time or space or access to live their real life. It becomes a duality. So what we have to do is how do the programs and the things that we do almost like streams move into the pathway of our pathway of discipleship, because you need some of those programs. People aren't going to just jump into deep discipleship. They need some on-ramps. On-ramps are fine. They can be short-term things. So we really train in terms of how do you have pathways that are fine for people to jump into. But sometimes we have to, one of the words we use is sometimes you have to lighten the cart of the church bells and whistles and everything you do, so you can actually feed the horses of your leaders so they can actually do it. Sometimes the cart's so heavy duty, the horse is sitting on the cart and just riding down to you. But we're not developing people. And so it doesn't mean you get rid of all those things. It just means, what can we prune down that has so much growth but doesn't have fruit? And that becomes important. So there's different metaphors we can use to think it through. It's not all or nothing. It's just discerning what God's saying. What do we want to keep here? And that is contributing to the pathway of discipleship. What's just an ongoing thing we're doing that doesn't have any life in it anymore? So we call them, sometimes you have to pivot things. Sometimes you have to, reshape how you do them. So those are some of the things we talk about in terms of doing it. So it's not all or nothing. We want to keep some of these things.
Wonderful.
So we never want to blow up the church, man. This is the worst thing ever. Know, it's just, but how does it fit into, it doesn't have to do all the heavy lifting. We have other vehicles to do heavy lifting. That's the thing that we have to, that's what we have to calibrate differently. So
wonderful.
Yeah.
And so the way forward, some of that includes pruning. Some of that includes a rethinking. We're here to invest in the character and competence of people, not so that those character and competence can always be used in our program. We want to train somebody to be a better musician so that they can lead worship, or we want to train someone to be a better teacher so they can help out in Sunday school, or we want to train somebody to be more friendly so they can be a greeter.
All good things, but just not the best thing, right?
And so to equip people to really take that discipleship momentum and movement outside of the walls and see and celebrate. And that, I think, is also a part of Sunday morning. Is yes, we're here to worship the King, but we're also here worshiping, I think, is taking a pause. And as we were talking a little bit earlier in my office about lingering in celebration.
Yes.
And so being able to, on Sunday morning, linger and celebrate what God did during the week.
That's right. And that's a paradigm shift. You're not coming to Sundays to get serviced.
That's right.
You're coming to celebrate.
That's right. To bring what God did and
during your week.
Show everybody.
Celebrate what happened during your week. And if you're not experiencing God during the week, and you're only counting on that hour and a half on Sunday, that puts us in a pretty tough place.
Yeah, it's almost like saying, I'm going to fast 7 days, 6 days a week, and for 1 hour I'll eat, and the rest of the week I'm not going to eat.
Not good spiritual formation.
No.
Yeah.
So here's what I want to remind you if you're listening. First of all, if you have a story of discipleship, if you have just a praise, or you want to linger in some of that celebration, please email me, blocke, Locke, at hopecenter.cc. We'd love to get those stories. We'll actually be creating more streamlined ways for people to interact and dialogue as we do these podcasts. The second thing I want to say is that this is not the only time you'll hear or see Sean here at Hope Center. Sean and I go way back. We planted together when he was planting Shelter. I was planting River Life in Sacramento, and we always have had fun together. But and even in 3DM, when Sean started jumping on board with that, he pulled me into it, said, "Bro, you need to follow me as I follow Christ in this." And so I started
Thanks for
doing
submitting,
that.
Bud. That was nice. Not
So
always easy.
I started doing that, and then look, God brought us
Back
just
together.
a few miles from each other.
Which is hilarious to
Yes,
me, bro.
yeah.
And Hope Center is the church that initially supported me when I got into Young Life staff. This was my home church for years.
This is awesome.
And so I love this church. I love this family here. I started here. You guys have blessed me and sent me out. I mean, so there's tons of history here. So this is fun to be back.
So we'll definitely be partnering in the future. You'll hear some more language. We'll probably have them do some more podcasts, even have them up front and preaching on Sunday morning if he promises to be good.
Yeah,
and,
not over challenge. Don't blow everybody out.
So thank you for joining us on our first ever How Might Hope podcast. And we'll look forward to talking with you next month.
Good to see you. Thanks.